I am Morgan Riley, 31 years old, and I never thought my own father would slap me across the face at my brother Carlos's wedding. All because I refused to give up my penthouse apartment that I had worked so hard for. The slap stung, but not nearly as much as the betrayal. The room of 200 guests fell silent as I touched my burning cheek and whispered words that changed everything. "You just lost me." If you're watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are from. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself when family crosses the line. Growing up in Boston, our family lived a comfortable middle-class life. Nothing extravagant, but we never went without. My father William worked as a bank manager while my mother Patricia taught elementary school. My younger brother Carlos was always the golden child from the moment he arrived when I was 5 years old. The family dynamics were clear even to me as a child. Carlos could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. While I was expected to be responsible, get straight A's, and help around the house, Carlos sailed through life with half the effort and twice the praise. When he got a C in math, my parents would say, "At least he passed." When I got an A-, they would ask why it was not an A+. That pattern continued throughout our childhood and into our teen years. Despite this imbalance, I loved my brother. Carlos had a carefree charm that made him popular and likable. He would flash his winning smile and talk his way out of trouble while I worked diligently in the background. I did not resent him for it. I simply recognized that we were different people with different paths. After high school, I worked 2 jobs to put myself through college, earning a business degree with honors. No one came to my graduation ceremony because Carlos had a baseball tournament that weekend. I told myself it did not matter. I was used to celebrating my achievements alone. While Carlos drifted between community college programs, never quite finding his passion, I launched my career with fierce determination. Starting as an entry-level marketing associate at a tech company, I worked 80-hour weeks, took night classes to learn coding, and eventually developed a software solution that revolutionized how the company managed client relationships. By 27, I had started my own tech consultancy firm. The business grew rapidly as my reputation for solving complex problems spread. Within 3 years, I had a team of 25 employees and contracts with major corporations. The financial success surprised even me. I went from scraping by to substantial wealth in what felt like the blink of an eye. When I turned 30, I finally allowed myself to fulfill a personal dream. After years of saving and investing wisely, I purchased a stunning penthouse apartment in downtown Boston with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. The 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom space with a private rooftop terrace represented everything I had worked for. Every morning, I would sip coffee while watching the sunrise over the water, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment and peace. As my success grew, so did my parents' expectations. What started as occasional requests for loans became regular expectations. They called when Carlos needed a new car after wrecking his 3rd one. They called when he wanted to take a girlfriend on an expensive vacation. They called when he needed first and last month's rent for an apartment he would move out of 3 months later. I rarely said no. Part of me still craved their approval, and part of me genuinely wanted to help my brother. But I noticed that the appreciation for these gifts diminished with each check I wrote. What started as profuse gratitude became casual expectations. My mother would often say, "Well, it is not like you need the money anyway." When Carlos announced his engagement to Rebecca, a woman from a wealthy family he had been dating for just 8 months, my parents were ecstatic. I was invited to the engagement party where I met Rebecca for the first time. She was beautiful, polished, and clearly used to luxury. Her parents owned several car dealerships across New England and had apparently promised the couple a lavish wedding. What my parents did not tell me until later was that they had also promised to contribute significantly to the wedding costs, money they did not actually have. My mother called me in tears, explaining how they could not back out now without embarrassing themselves in front of Rebecca's family. Without hesitation, I transferred enough money to cover their portion, asking only that they keep my contribution private. I wanted Carlos to have his perfect day without the complication of feeling indebted to his sister. As the wedding day approached, I felt a mix of emotions. I was happy for Carlos finding someone who seemed to make him happy, but I also felt the familiar pang of being an outsider in my own family. The wedding preparations consumed all family conversations, and once again, my accomplishments faded into the background. When I closed a major contract with an international client, my mother listened for 30 seconds before interrupting to ask if I had mailed back my RSVP card. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect weather. I put on the emerald green bridesmaid dress that Rebecca had selected, styled my dark hair in elegant waves, and applied makeup that highlighted my hazel eyes. Looking in the mirror, I reminded myself that today was about Carlos, not about our complicated family dynamics. I would smile, dance, and celebrate my brother, even if part of me still felt like the forgotten daughter. I drove to the luxurious oceanfront resort where the ceremony would take place, pulling my BMW into the valet line behind a row of luxury vehicles. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out into the sunshine, smoothed my dress, and walked toward the grand entrance, unaware that this would be the day everything in my family would finally come to a breaking point. The Burton Resort was even more spectacular than I had imagined when I helped pay for it. Situated on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, the historic mansion had been converted into a premier wedding venue with manicured gardens and a glass-walled reception hall. Arrangements of white roses and silver accents adorned every surface, and a string quartet played softly in the corner of the garden where the ceremony would take place. All of this luxury came with a price tag that would have bought a small house in some neighborhoods. As I walked through the garden toward the gathering guests, I noticed several relatives doing double takes when they saw me. Aunt Judith rushed over, her eyebrows raised in surprise. "Morgan, is that you? We were not sure you would make it. You are always so busy with your little business," she said, her tone suggesting my career was some sort of hobby rather than a multimillion-dollar company. "I would not miss my only brother's wedding, Aunt Judith," I replied with a practiced smile. "How have you been?" "Oh, fine. Your cousin Melissa just had her third baby, you know. Such a blessing to see her fulfilling her purpose as a mother." She glanced meaningfully at my bare ring finger. "And what about you, dear? Any special someone yet?" Before I could answer, my Judith, the photographer, wants family photos in 10 minutes by the rose garden. "Morgan, you look nice, but could you touch up your lipstick?" "It is a bit faded," she said, barely looking at me before hurrying away to direct another group of guests. I slipped into the bathroom to check my appearance. My lipstick was perfectly fine. This was just another example of how nothing I did was ever quite good enough. As I walked back out, I nearly collided with Carlos, looking handsome in his tailored tuxedo. "Hey sis," he said, giving me a brief, awkward hug. "Thanks for coming." "Of course I came. Congratulations, Carlos." "Rebecca seems wonderful," I said sincerely. "Yeah, she is amazing," he replied, shifting uncomfortably. "Did you bring the wedding gift?" I reached into my clutch and pulled out an envelope containing a check for $5,000 along with a heartfelt card. "Right here. I hope you both love it." Carlos took the envelope, peeked inside, and his eyes widened slightly at the amount. He quickly regained his composure and slipped it into his pocket without reading the card. "Thanks. That will help with the honeymoon. Listen, I gotta go check on some things before the ceremony. See you later, okay?" He hurried off without waiting for my response, leaving me standing alone once again. The interaction felt transactional rather than brotherly, but I pushed the feeling aside. Today was not the day to dwell on old wounds. As guests continued to arrive, I spotted my cousin Samantha, the only family member I truly connected with. She was 4 years younger than me and had recently graduated from medical school. Unlike the rest of the family, she seemed to genuinely admire my independence and career success. "Morgan," she exclaimed, wrapping me in a genuine hug. "You look absolutely gorgeous. How is the tech world treating you?" "Business is good," I smiled, appreciating her interest. "How about you? How is residency going?" "Exhausting but worth it," she replied. "Listen, I wanted to warn you about something. I overheard Aunt Patricia and Uncle William talking earlier about you, and it seemed intense. Something about your place downtown?" I could not hear everything, but they mentioned Carlos and Rebecca needing somewhere to live after the honeymoon. A knot formed in my stomach. That is strange. No one has mentioned anything to me. Samantha squeezed my arm. "Just giving you a heads up. You know how this family can be sometimes." Before we could discuss it further, the wedding coordinator announced that everyone should take their seats for the ceremony. I found my place in the third row on the groom's side, next to distant relatives who barely acknowledged me. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Rebecca floated down the aisle in a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. Carlos looked genuinely happy as they exchanged vows against the backdrop of the sparkling ocean. For a moment, I felt a pang of something like loneliness. While I loved my independence, there was something touching about two people promising to build a life together. As the newlyweds walked back up the aisle to thunderous applause, I caught my parents watching me from their front row seats. My father whispered something to my mother, and they both looked my way with expressions I could not quite read. Then my father nodded toward Carlos, who glanced back at me with an odd, almost guilty look. Something was definitely off, and Samantha's warning echoed in my mind as guests began moving toward the reception hall. Whatever was going on, I had a feeling I was about to find out, and I suspected I was not going to like it. The reception was in full swing by the time I made my way into the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over elegantly set tables, and the band played a jazzy rendition of a popular love song as couples filled the dance floor. I took a glass of champagne from a passing server and found my assigned seat at a table with distant cousins and friends of my parents who barely knew me. After dinner and the traditional first dances, I decided to mingle rather than sit alone at my table. As I walked toward the bar, a tall man with kind eyes and a warm smile approached me. "You must be the sister of the groom," he said, extending his hand. "I am Ethan Parker, friend of Carlos from college." "Morgan Riley," I replied, shaking his hand. Though I am surprised Carlos mentioned having a sister. He tends to forget that detail in everyday life. Ethan laughed, a genuine sound that made me smile despite myself. "He mentioned you run some kind of successful tech company. Said his big sister was the smart one in the family." I was surprised Carlos had spoken about me at all, let alone in complimentary terms. "We have our different strengths," I said diplomatically. "I would love to hear about your company," Ethan said, leaning against the bar. "I work in venture capital, so I am always interested in tech innovations." For the next 20 minutes, Ethan and I engaged in the most stimulating conversation I had experienced all day. He asked intelligent questions about my business model and shared insights about market trends. It was refreshing to talk to someone who saw me as more than just Carlos's spinster sister. "Would you like to dance?" Ethan asked as the band shifted to a slower song. Before I could answer, I felt a hand on my shoulder. My mother stood there, her smile tight and not reaching her eyes. "Morgan, dear, your father and I need to speak with you for a moment." "It is important," she said, glancing dismissively at Ethan. "I am in the middle of a conversation, Mom," I replied, feeling childishly defiant. "It will only take a minute," she insisted, her grip on my shoulder tightening. "Family matters." I apologized to Ethan, who graciously understood, and followed my mother to a quieter corner of the venue where my father was waiting, looking uncharacteristically nervous. As we approached, I saw Carlos walking toward us as well, looking uncomfortable but determined. "What is going on?" I asked, instantly on guard. "Is everything okay?" My mother's demeanor shifted immediately, her voice becoming syrupy sweet. "Morgan, sweetheart, you look beautiful tonight. That color really brings out your eyes." I recognized this tactic. My mother only complimented me when she wanted something. "Thank you. What did you want to talk about?" "Well," she began, placing her hand on my arm, "we have been thinking about Carlos and Rebecca's future. They are just starting their lives together, and we want to make sure they have the best possible beginning." My father nodded solemnly. A solid foundation is important for a young marriage. Carlos joined us, standing slightly behind my parents as if using them as shields. Rebecca was nowhere to be seen, probably mingling with her family and friends. "As you know," my mother continued, "real estate in the city is so expensive for young couples just starting out. And with Rebecca coming from such a nice background, they want to maintain a certain standard of living." My stomach began to sink as I realized where this conversation was heading. Still, I let my mother continue her carefully rehearsed speech. "We were talking about how perfect your penthouse would be for them. 3 bedrooms for when they start a family, that gorgeous view, and the location is ideal for Carlos's new job downtown." I blinked, certain I had misheard. "My penthouse? What about my penthouse?" My father stepped forward. "What your mother is trying to say is that we think it would be a wonderful wedding gift if you would let Carlos and Rebecca move into your penthouse." "Move in? You mean rent it from me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Well, no," my mother said with an uncomfortable laugh. "We mean give it to them. As a gift. You could easily find another place. With your money, you could buy any apartment in the city." I stared at them in disbelief. "You want me to give away my home? The home I worked years to afford? The place I love living in?" Carlos finally spoke up. "It would really help us out, sis. Rebecca has always dreamed of living in that part of the city, and when Mom and Dad mentioned you had a place there." So they had been discussing this plan with Carlos, but not with me, the actual owner of the property in question. "This is the first I am hearing about this," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "Why did no one think to discuss this with me before the wedding day?" "We did not want to bother you," my mother said dismissively. "You are always so busy with work." Too busy for a conversation about giving away my home. My voice rose slightly and a few nearby guests glanced our way. My father frowned. "Lower your voice, Morgan. This is your brother's wedding day." "Exactly," I replied. "Which makes this an incredibly inappropriate time to ambush me with such a request." My mother's sweet facade began to crack. "It is not an ambush. It is a perfectly reasonable family request. Family helps family. Carlos needs that apartment more than you do. You are just one person in that big space, while they will be starting a family." "You do not know that I will always be just one person," I countered. "And even if I were, that does not make my home up for grabs." Carlos shifted uncomfortably. "Rebecca already told her parents about the penthouse. They are expecting us to move in after the honeymoon." I stared at him incredulously. "You told her parents you were getting my home before even asking me." "We assumed you would want to help your brother," my father said, his voice hardening. "You have always been selfish, Morgan, but we thought you would do this one thing for Carlos." More guests were beginning to notice our heated conversation, and a small crowd had gathered at a polite distance, pretending not to eavesdrop, but clearly interested in the family drama unfolding. "I have been selfish," I repeated, unable to believe what I was hearing. "I paid for half of this wedding without being asked. I have given Carlos money for cars, rent, vacations. I have supported this family financially for years without complaint." "That is different," my mother said. "That was just money. This is your brother's future." "And what about my future?" I asked. "That penthouse is my home." My father's face was growing redder by the second. "You need to stop thinking only about yourself for once. Carlos is married now. He has responsibilities. You are still single with no one to worry about but yourself." The crowd around us had grown, and I could see Rebecca making her way toward us, her expression curious and concerned. "I am not giving away my home," I said firmly. "I am happy to help Carlos and Rebecca in other ways, but that penthouse is not on the table." My mother's eyes filled with tears, another manipulation tactic I recognized from childhood. How can you be so cruel on your brother's special day? All we are asking is that you show some family loyalty. The situation was escalating, and I knew I needed to end this conversation before it completely ruined the reception. We can discuss this another time, in private, I said, turning to leave. My father grabbed my arm, stopping me. No, we are settling this now. Carlos told Rebecca's parents they would have that penthouse. Do you want to make him look like a liar on his wedding day? The room seemed to shrink around us as more and more guests noticed the confrontation. Even the band had quieted, sensing the tension in the air. Carlos made a promise he had no right to make, I said, pulling my arm free. That is not my responsibility to fix. The reception had come to a standstill. The band had stopped playing, and a circle had formed around our family, with guests pretending to sip their drinks while watching the drama unfold. Rebecca had reached Carlos and was whispering urgently in his ear, her eyes darting between me and my parents. My father took a step closer to me, his face now fully flushed with anger. I could smell the whiskey on his breath as he spoke, his voice low and threatening. You listen to me, young lady. Your brother has always been there for this family while you ran off to build your fancy career and fancy life. The least you can do is help him now. Been there for the family? How exactly? I asked, genuinely confused. I am the one who has financially supported everyone for years. Money is not everything, Morgan, my mother interjected, dabbing at her eyes with a cocktail napkin. Carlos has given us his time, his presence. He calls us every week, visits on holidays. When was the last time you came home for Sunday dinner? I felt a pang of guilt despite myself. It was true that I had distanced myself from regular family gatherings, but not without reason. Maybe I would come around more if I did not feel judged and used every time I did. My father scoffed. Used? Is that how you see your family? As people who use you. What would you call asking me to give away my home? I countered. Carlos finally spoke up, stepping forward from behind our parents. Morgan, be reasonable. You make more money in a month than I make in a year. You could buy another penthouse tomorrow if you wanted to. That is not the point, Carlos. That penthouse is my home. I love living there. I worked hard for it. Would you give away your home if I asked? He looked uncomfortable. That is different. How is it different? I pressed. Rebecca joined the conversation, her wedding gown rustling as she moved to stand beside Carlos. Morgan, we did not mean to upset you. We just thought, since you are so successful, that you would want to help us start our lives together in style. I noticed she said we, already including herself in this family scheme despite having met me only a handful of times. I also noted that she seemed more concerned about losing the penthouse than about the scene unfolding at her wedding. I am happy to help you both in other ways, I repeated. I could help with a down payment on your own place. But I am not giving up my home. My father's jaw tightened dangerously. After everything we have done for you, this is how you repay us? By embarrassing us in front of Rebecca's family? By denying your brother the one thing he has asked of you? The everything we have done for you line struck a nerve. My parents had provided the basics during my childhood, yes, but they had never supported my ambitions or celebrated my achievements. Every accomplishment was met with indifference or criticism. What exactly have you done for me that entitles you to We raised you. My father exploded, loud enough that people at the back of the crowd jumped. We put food on the table, clothes on your back, a roof over your head. We gave you life. You did the legal minimum required of parents, I replied calmly. And I am grateful for that. But it does not entitle you to the fruits of my adult labor. My mother began to sob dramatically, drawing sympathetic looks from some of the older relatives. How can you be so cold? So unfeeling? This is your family. Yes, and family should respect boundaries, I said. Family should not demand that I give up my home as if my needs and feelings do not matter. Your needs, my father sneered. What needs? You are a single woman with no husband, no children. What do you need a 3-bedroom penthouse for? To impress your business associates? To feel important? Each word was designed to wound, to diminish me and my accomplishments. I felt a familiar ache in my chest, the pain of never being enough in my parents' eyes despite everything I had achieved. That penthouse is mine, I said firmly. I earned it. I love it. And I am not giving it up. The tension in the air was palpable. Rebecca's parents had joined the circle now, watching with thinly veiled disdain. I could only imagine what Carlos had promised them about his wealthy sister's generous gift. "You selfish, ungrateful child," my father hissed, stepping even closer. "After everything we have sacrificed for you." "I am not a child," I replied. "I am a 31-year-old woman who has built a successful life through hard work and determination. And I do not owe you my home." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. My father's face contorted with rage, his control finally snapping. Before I could react, his hand swung through the air and connected with my cheek in a slap that echoed through the silent ballroom. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a glass. Rebecca covered her mouth in shock. Carlos stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. The sting spread across my face, but I did not cry. I did not scream or cause a scene. Instead, I straightened my spine, looked my father directly in the eyes, and spoke just loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "You just lost me." 3 simple words that carried the weight of a lifetime of disappointment and hurt. 3 words that marked the end of something and the beginning of something else entirely. My father seemed to realize what he had done as whispers spread through the crowd. His hand fell to his side, and for a moment he looked older and smaller than I had ever seen him. "Morgan, he began, but I was already—" With my head held high and my cheek burning, I walked through the parting crowd toward the exit, leaving behind the stunned silence of 200 wedding guests who had just witnessed the unraveling of our family facade. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped outside the reception hall, providing slight relief to my stinging cheek. The valet looked at me with concern, but said nothing as I handed him my ticket. I maintained my composure, keeping my back straight and my chin up despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. Only when I was safely out of sight of the venue did I allow my hand to touch my cheek, still warm from the impact of my father's palm. I could not remember the last time he had struck me, perhaps when I was 12 and had talked back about a curfew. Even then, it had been a quick, reactionary swat, not a deliberate, public humiliation like this. As I waited for the valet to bring my car, I heard footsteps behind me. Turning slightly, I saw Ethan, the man I had been speaking with earlier, approaching cautiously. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I saw what happened in there." "So did everyone else," I said, attempting a smile that did not quite reach my eyes. Not exactly how I planned to make an exit. "Your father had no right to do that," Ethan said, his expression serious. "No one has the right to put their hands on you, family or not." Before I could respond, my car arrived. The valet opened the door, studiously avoiding eye contact, clearly having heard about the incident already. "I should go," I said to Ethan. He hesitated, then pulled a business card from his pocket. I accepted the card, touched by the small kindness from a virtual stranger when my own family had just betrayed me so completely. "Thank you." As I slid into the driver's seat, I noticed my hands were shaking. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, willing myself to hold it together at least until I was away from the venue. But as I pulled onto the main road, the first tear escaped, followed quickly by another and another until I was forced to pull over because I could no longer see through the blur. In the privacy of my car, parked on a quiet side street, I finally allowed myself to break down. Sobs racked my body as years of suppressed hurt, disappointment, and anger poured out. I cried for the little girl who had never been good enough, for the young woman whose achievements were consistently overlooked, and for the adult who had just been publicly humiliated by the people who should have loved her most. My phone began buzzing incessantly in my purse. I pulled it out to find a flood of text messages and missed calls. Some were from Samantha, asking if I was okay and where I had gone. Others were from distant relatives and family friends expressing shock and concern. There was one from Carlos that simply read, "That was messed up. You okay?" Nothing from my parents. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of what had transpired. As my sobs subsided into hiccuping breaths, my phone rang again. It was Samantha. I answered, my voice still thick with tears. "Morgan? Where are you? Are you all right?" Her voice was filled with genuine concern. "I am parked a few blocks away," I admitted. "I could not drive like this." "Stay there." "I am coming to you," she said decisively. "You should not be alone right now." 20 minutes later, Samantha tapped on my window, her face drawn with worry. She was still in her wedding guest dress, but had thrown a jacket over it and changed into flat shoes. I unlocked the door, and she slid into the passenger seat. Without a word, she reached over and enveloped me in a hug. That simple act of compassion nearly set me off crying again, but I managed to maintain control. "Everyone is talking about it," she said when she finally released me. "Uncle William is trying to act like nothing happened, but Aunt Patricia is a mess. Carlos and Rebecca are putting on brave faces, but you can tell they are mortified." "I ruined their wedding," I said, guilt creeping in despite everything. Samantha shook her head emphatically. "No, you did not. Uncle William ruined it when he decided to slap his daughter in front of 200 people because she would not give away her home. That is not on you, Morgan." Hearing someone else frame it that way helped clarify my own thoughts. My entire life, I had accepted blame that was not mine to carry, believing that if I could just be better, do more, my family would finally appreciate me. But in that moment, I realized the painful truth. Nothing would ever be enough for them. "I cannot believe they expected me to give them my penthouse," I said, shaking my head in disbelief. "Who does that? Who asks someone to give away their home?" "Entitled people who have always seen you as a resource rather than a person," Samantha replied bluntly. "I love Uncle William and Aunt Patricia, but they have never treated you fairly, Morgan. Everyone in the family sees it, even if no one talks about it." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of this revelation settling over me. All those years of trying to earn their approval, of making excuses for their behavior, of blaming myself for the distance between us. It had never been about me at all. It had been about their inability to see me as separate from what I could provide for them. "What are you going to do now?" Samantha asked gently. I took a deep breath, wiping away the last of my tears. "I am going to go home, to my penthouse, the one I worked for and earned and love. And then I am going to figure out what kind of relationship, if any, I want to have with my family moving forward." Samantha nodded. "That sounds like a good plan. Are you okay to drive? I can come with you if you want." "I will be all right," I assured her, feeling steadier now. "Thank you for coming to find me. It means a lot." After Samantha returned to the wedding, I drove home in a strange state of emotional numbness. The city lights blurred past my window as I navigated the familiar route to my building. The doorman greeted me with his usual friendly smile, showing no awareness that my world had just been upended. As I rode the elevator to the top floor, I thought about how my parents had never even visited my penthouse. I had invited them multiple times when I first moved in, eager to show them what I had achieved, but they always had excuses. Carlos had come once, only to ask for money to fix his car the same day. I stepped into my home, the place that had become my sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the glittering city skyline and the dark harbor waters beyond. The spacious open floor plan, the gourmet kitchen where I loved to cook, the comfortable furniture I had carefully selected. Every inch of this space represented my hard work, my success, my independence. For the first time, I saw my penthouse not just as a beautiful home, but as a symbol of everything my family had tried to take from me over the years. My confidence, my achievements, my right to define my own success. And now, quite literally, They had tried to take my home as well. As I stood, tomorrow would bring difficult conversations and painful decisions. But tonight, I would reclaim my peace in the home that was mine and mine alone. A week after the wedding disaster, I sat in my home office reviewing quarterly projections when my phone rang. Carlos's name flashed on the screen. I had not spoken to any family members since walking out of the reception, though my phone had been flooded with messages from relatives either condemning my selfish behavior or expressing awkward support. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Hello, Carlos." "Hey, sis," he said, his tone uncharacteristically subdued. "How are you doing?" "I have been better," I replied honestly. "How was the rest of the wedding?" He sighed heavily. "It was weird. Mom cried a lot. Dad got drunk and Rebecca's parents left early. Not exactly the fairy tale ending we planned." An awkward silence stretched between us. I waited, curious to see if he would acknowledge what had happened or if he would pretend everything was normal, as our family had always done when faced with uncomfortable truths. "Look," he finally said, "what Dad..." It was the barest minimum of acknowledgement, but from Carlos, it was something. "Thank you for saying that." Another pause. "So, about the penthouse thing." Of course. It always came back to what he wanted. "Carlos, I am not giving you my home." "I get that," he said quickly. "But maybe we could work something out? Like, Rebecca and I could rent it from you for a while? Just until we find something else?" Her parents are pretty disappointed that we will not be living where we told them we would. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "You told her parents you would be living in my penthouse before even asking me if that was a possibility." "I know it sounds bad when you put it that way," he admitted. "But Mom and Dad were so sure you would say yes. They said you always help out family." "There is a difference between helping and being taken advantage of," I said firmly. "I am happy to help you and Rebecca find a place within your budget. I could even assist with a down payment if you want to buy something. But my home is not available." I could almost hear him pouting through the phone. "Fine. I guess we will figure something out." No apology for his role in the debacle. No real acknowledgement of how inappropriate the entire situation had been. Just disappointment that he would not be getting what he wanted. "I hope you do," I said. "I wish you and Rebecca happiness, Carlos." "I really do." After hanging up, I called the therapist I had been seeing for the past few days. Dr. Marshall had been recommended by a colleague who knew I was dealing with family issues. In just 3 sessions, she had helped me start to untangle the complex web of guilt, obligation, and manipulation that had characterized my family relationships for years. "My brother just called," I told her when we connected. He half apologized for what happened at the wedding, then immediately asked if he could rent my penthouse instead. Dr. Marshall's voice was calm and steady. "And how did that make you feel?" "Unsurprised," I admitted. "That pattern sounds familiar from what you have told me about your family dynamics," she observed. "Have you thought more about what boundaries you want to establish going forward?" Boundaries. The word still felt foreign to me when applied to family. I had always believed that family meant saying yes, helping out, being there no matter what. The idea that I could set limits on what I would accept from my parents and brother was both liberating and terrifying. "I think I need some distance," I said slowly. "At least until they can acknowledge how inappropriate their behavior has been, not just at the wedding but for years." "That sounds like a healthy first step," Dr. Marshall encouraged. "Remember, boundaries are not punishment. They are protection for your own well-being." After our session, I spent the evening drafting emails to various family members. To distant relatives who had reached out with support, I sent brief but grateful responses. To those who had criticized me, I said nothing. And to my parents, after multiple drafts and deletions, I sent a simple message. "I need space to process what happened at the wedding. Please respect that I do not wish to communicate until I am ready. Morgan." My finger hovered over the send button for several minutes before I finally pressed it. It was the first time in my life I had directly told my parents no and set a clear boundary. It felt both terrifying and empowering. The next morning, I was reviewing contracts in my home office when the doorman called up. "Ms. Riley, your mother is here asking to see you. Should I send her up?" My heart raced. Of course, she would show up unannounced rather than respecting my request for space. "No, thank you, James. Please tell her I am not available." 10 minutes later, my phone exploded with texts from my mother. "I came all this way to see you. This is ridiculous, Morgan. We need to talk about what happened. You cannot shut out your family forever." I turned my phone to silent and returned to my work. 3 hours later, another call from the doorman informed me that she had finally left after sitting in the lobby for hours. That evening, I found a small gift, no acknowledgement of my father's violence. No apology for their inappropriate demands. Just a box of chocolates and a request to pretend nothing had happened, as we had always done. I dropped the gift bag in the trash chute on my way to meet Samantha for dinner. "They will never change," Samantha said after I recounted the day's events. We were sitting at a quiet table in my favorite restaurant, sharing a bottle of wine. "Uncle William and Aunt Patricia have always been this way. The question is, what will you do differently?" "I am working on it," I said honestly. "My therapist says I need to accept that I cannot change them. I can only change how I respond to them." As we finished dinner, my phone lit up with a text from Ethan, the man I had met at the wedding. We had been texting casually throughout the week, initially just checking in on my well-being but gradually sharing more about ourselves. He was intelligent, thoughtful, and refreshingly direct. "Any interest in coffee this weekend?" No pressure, just thought it might be nice to talk without a family crisis happening in the background. I smiled and typed back, "I would like that." Over the next few weeks, I established a new normal. I threw myself into work, continued therapy, and began building a social circle that extended beyond family obligations. Ethan and I met for coffee, which turned into dinner, which turned into regular dates. He was unlike anyone I had dated before, secure in himself and genuinely interested in my thoughts and ambitions. My parents continued their attempts to reconnect on their terms. My father sent an email that came as close to an apology as he was capable of. "I should not have lost my temper at the wedding. Let's move past this unfortunate misunderstanding." As if slapping his adult daughter in public was merely a misunderstanding. Carlos and Rebecca eventually found an apartment they could afford in a nice, but not luxury building. My mother could not resist informing me that it was nothing like your place, of course, but they are making do. With each passing day, I felt myself growing stronger, more certain of my worth outside of my family's narrow definition. I began to recognize the patterns that had shaped our relationships for decades and, more importantly, to break free of them. 6 weeks after the wedding, I came home to find my mother sitting in my building lobby. This time, instead of avoiding her, I decided to face the situation head-on. "Morgan," she said, standing as I approached. She looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than I remembered. "Can we talk? Please?" I nodded toward the elevators. "We can talk in my home, the one I am not giving away." She flinched slightly but followed me. As we rode up in silence, I realized I was no longer afraid of this conversation. Whatever she had to say, I knew my worth now in a way I never had before. As we entered my penthouse, I watched her eyes widen as she took in the space for the first time. The wall of windows showcasing the harbor view. The elegant furnishings. The artwork I had carefully selected. Her expression shifted from impressed to calculating, and I could almost see her mentally appraising the value. "Would you like some tea?" I asked, maintaining the politeness that had been drilled into me since childhood. She nodded, perching awkwardly on the edge of my sofa. When I returned with 2 cups, she took a small sip before speaking. "Your father and I feel that this situation has gone on long enough," she began, her tone reasonable. "Families disagree sometimes, but in the end, blood is thicker than water." I sat across from her, keeping my expression neutral. "What exactly are you hoping to accomplish with this visit, Mom?" She seemed taken aback by my directness. "Well, To put this unpleasantness behind us, of course. To be a family again. The unpleasantness being Dad slapping me in public because I would not give away my home. I clarified. She winced. Your father lost his temper. He knows he should not have done that. But you know how he gets when he is worked up. And you did embarrass us in front of Rebecca's family. And there it was. Even in her attempt at reconciliation, she was placing the blame on me. Some things truly never changed. Mom, I said gently, I am willing to have a relationship with you and Dad going forward, but it needs to be different from what it was before. I need acknowledgement of the patterns that have hurt me, and I need respect for my boundaries. She stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. What patterns? What boundaries? We are your parents, Morgan. We have always wanted what is best for you. What you think is best for me, I corrected. Not necessarily what actually is best for me or what I want for myself. We talked for another hour, going in circles as she tried various approaches to bring me back into the fold without addressing the underlying issues. When she finally left, we had reached no real resolution, but I had maintained my position without anger or defensiveness, which felt like its own kind of victory. As I closed the door behind her, I realized something important. I was no longer desperate for their approval. I could love my family without needing them to validate my choices or my worth. That revelation, more than anything else, felt like true freedom. 6 months after the wedding incident, I stood on my rooftop terrace, watching the sun set over the harbor. The past half year had brought changes I could never have anticipated on that tumultuous day when my father's hand connected with my cheek. My penthouse had undergone a transformation, much like myself. I had hired an interior designer to help me reimagine the space, replacing furniture that had been selected to impress others with pieces that brought me joy. The formal dining room had become a combination library and meditation space. The guest bedroom that had never hosted family now housed my growing collection of art and a comfortable daybed where I could read and relax. For the first time, my home truly felt like a sanctuary rather than a symbol of achievement to wave in front of my family. It was mine in a deeper sense now, reflecting my authentic self rather than the successful persona I had constructed to earn approval that never came. My phone chimed with a text from Ethan, running 5 minutes late. Traffic on the bridge. Cannot wait to see you. I smiled, feeling the now familiar warmth that thoughts of him brought. Our relationship had developed slowly and thoughtfully over the past months. He respected my boundaries, celebrated my successes without jealousy, and most importantly, saw me for who I was rather than what I could provide. It was a new experience to be valued for myself alone. As I waited for him to arrive, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. My relationship with my parents remained complicated, but had evolved into something more honest. After several false starts and uncomfortable conversations, we had established a tentative new normal. 2 months after our failed attempt at reconciliation in my penthouse, my mother had called with news that my father had been diagnosed with high blood pressure. The doctor had warned him about stress and anger management. For the first time, there seemed to be a consequence for his temper that he could not ignore or justify away. That health scare had led to my father reluctantly agreeing to attend a family therapy session. It had been tense and difficult, with my father resistant to acknowledging any problematic patterns. But the simple act of having a neutral third party present who did not automatically take his side had shifted something fundamental in our dynamic. We were not close, and perhaps we never would be, but we had established a more honest relationship. I visited once a month for a brief lunch, maintained clear boundaries about what I would and would not discuss, and no longer felt guilty when I said no to requests that crossed those boundaries. My relationship with Carlos had undergone its own evolution. 2 months after the wedding, he had called me in a panic. Rebecca was pregnant, an unplanned but not unwelcome surprise. Their small apartment suddenly felt inadequate, and they were struggling to figure out next steps. I am not giving you my penthouse, I had said immediately, a reflex born from our last conversation. I know that, he had replied, surprising me. I am not calling to ask for your place. I do not know what to do, and you have always been good at figuring things out. That conversation had marked a turning point. For the first time, Carlos had reached out not for money or things, but for guidance. I had helped him create a financial plan, connected him with a realtor friend who specialized in helping young families find affordable homes in good school districts, and offered genuine support without sacrificing my own needs. Last week, Carlos and Rebecca had closed on a modest but charming house in a suburban neighborhood with excellent schools. I had given them a housewarming gift of a weekend getaway so they could have one last trip before the baby arrived, along with a check to start a college fund for their child. It was generous, but not self-sacrificing, a distinction I was finally learning to recognize. The elevator chimed, pulling me from my thoughts. Ethan stepped out onto the terrace, his smile warming me more than the lingering sun. He handed me a small bouquet of wildflowers, knowing I preferred them to expensive arrangements. Sorry I am late, he said, kissing me softly. The traffic was terrible. Worth the wait, I replied, taking his hand as we settled into the comfortable outdoor furniture to enjoy the view. As we talked about our days, I felt a deep sense of contentment. 6 months ago, I could not have imagined feeling this peaceful, this settled in my own skin. The crisis at Carlos's wedding had been painful but necessary, forcing me to confront patterns I had accepted for far too long. I had an interesting call today, I told Ethan as we finished the dinner we had prepared together. My cousin Samantha wants to start a tech business focused on healthcare applications. She asked if I would consider mentoring her. That sounds perfect for you, he said. You would be an amazing mentor. I think I would, I agreed, no longer feeling the need to downplay my accomplishments or expertise. We are meeting next week to discuss her business plan. The future stretched before me, full of possibilities that were of my own choosing rather than reactions to family expectations. I had learned that standing up for myself did not mean losing my family. It meant creating healthier relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation and guilt. Later that evening, as Ethan and I relaxed on the sofa with glasses of wine, he asked a question that made me pause. Do you ever regret what happened at the wedding? How everything went down? I considered the question carefully. I regret that it happened the way it did, in public, causing embarrassment to everyone involved. But I do not regret standing my ground. That moment, as painful as it was, forced me to recognize and address patterns that had been hurting me for years. So no, I cannot truly regret something that ultimately led to so much growth and healing. He nodded, understanding. Sometimes the most painful moments are the ones that lead to the greatest transformations. As I looked around my beautiful penthouse, at the life I had built for myself, at the man who respected and valued me for who I was, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had not been easy, but it had been necessary. I had learned that true family supports your growth rather than stunting it for their convenience. That love should lift you up, not diminish you. That boundaries are not selfish, but essential for healthy relationships. And perhaps most importantly, that I was worthy of respect simply for being who I was, not for what I could give or do for others. My father's slap at my brother's wedding had been a painful ending to one chapter of my life, but it had also been the beginning of something new and infinitely more authentic. For that unexpected gift, I could almost be grateful. If you have ever had to set difficult boundaries with family, please share your experience in the comments below. How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself? What helped you maintain those boundaries even when it was difficult? Remember that you are not alone in these struggles, and your story might help someone else find their own strength. Thank you for listening to my journey, and please like, subscribe, and share if this resonated with you. Until next time, remember that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful destinations.